Not that I think this idea that we have 50 governors out there doing their own thing, and when we have a country that in normal times, about 1 billion people a year fly domestically. Now let's cut that by 2/3. It's still a lot of people going around our country. We have trucks that are going all over the place from state to state. We have people that are visiting by car. I mean, it's not like this state is alone in the world. And if the state next door doesn't do what they should, and they come over here, or the state over on the East Coast doesn't do what they should, and they come by air, we are still in a critical situation. There has to be some leadership. And there's been a failure of leadership throughout this entire process. And I think you're seeing now how the people that are behind the scenes, whether they're scientists or secretaries or whatever that is, they're starting to go, we don't want to get caught up in this anymore without telling the truth, at least. And at least we have some people like Dr. Fauci trying to tell the truth. And I appreciate that. I talked, he was before our committee. I asked him a couple of questions. I asked the admiral that's in charge of logistics a couple of questions. And their thing for the future, as far as the late fall and the winter, is we hope. Well, we hope is not an answer. We hope that we get more companies making the PPE. We hope that we have enough testing. We hope that the hospitals don't get overrun. We hope, that's not where we should be. And we, in the HEROES Act, which has been held up now for 2 months in the Senate, in the HEROES Act, we have everything needed to get us through next year and on. And here we are because of politics. There is no room for politics in this. You either want to save Americans' lives or you don't want to save American lives. You either want to protect our children and our elderly or you don't want to do it. And the only way to do it is to work hard at it and take every opportunity you have to overcome it. And you either want to make sure we have an economy that comes back strong or you don't. Just identifying for a few months that we've done it doesn't help those people that are going to be unemployed for the next 2 years. It's not going to help people being kicked out and having to live on the streets. We had too many living homeless on the streets before this. You can imagine what's going to go on if we don't sustain this effort. And food, same thing. I can't tell you how many food banks we're working with and how many people are concerned and how many senior centers are out there working hard. And yet here we are in a situation. I was talking to people today that they want to take money, the state wanted to take money back from people that have been now giving out for the last 3 years 140-some thousand meals to our senior citizens. 3.5 months. So, it's not a good situation out there because of the lack of leadership in our country, because of somebody that doesn't understand the need to identify the American people need. The other issue is obviously, I had a town hall on schools. I don't know if any of you made it. I'm going to have another one next Tuesday. The bottom line there is, there are people that want to open up the schools really fast. I would love to do that. But the process is that we don't have the equipment for the schools. It hasn't been identified. The protocols are going to be different all over the nation because all the CDC wants to do is give guidance. And now we have a situation where the White House says, we want to give the information on hospitals to some private company and not to the CDC. That's never been done in the history of America, that we would not give information to the CDC. Those are the people we need the most right now. And so we have that to overcome. But our schools are in a situation where children, some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And somebody said to me the other day, well, they don't die from this. They're better off than everybody else. A child with pre-existing conditions is a child with pre-existing conditions. You don't know that. We don't. Today we had a discussion with FEMA, and I got a weekly discussion now finally because they had stopped them for a while. When we talked a week and a half ago, he said, "Well, I'll start them up again." It's the director of the whole Western region, and we found out that this virus will change over time, as most viruses do. The normal flu changes over time. And how we're going to be able to keep up with that when and if we get a vaccine, or how we have the therapeutic drugs necessary to fight it off. But to open up schools right now without the supplies that they need, if hospitals don't have the supplies, where are the masks for the children? Now, it might be a surgical mask, but I don't want to put a teacher in the middle of a room with all these children in a school that doesn't have has an older ventilation system that is going to impact, because this stuff now we know moves through the air, and these systems need to be changed. We have money in the budget, HEROES Act, $95 billion to help with that process. The Senate has held it up. We have, so how do you open schools under those circumstances? And teachers who are, quite frankly, older than students, luckily, are ones that are going to be impacted. So we have to protect them at a higher level and not just the surgical mask level. And so many of the schools don't have their protocols yet. Our state doesn't have a protocol. Our country definitely doesn't have a protocol. And so we're rushing into a situation where they just found out that it doesn't work to rush into these situations. We have bars closing down, restaurants closing down, health clubs closing down because we didn't take the precautionary measures correctly, and we didn't do protocols around this nation to make sure people are safe. So I think the HEROES Act has to be something that we're not going to get the whole 3.2 trillion. There's no doubt about that, but that's a starting point. We need to get our states, cities, towns, counties, tribes more money. Otherwise, you're going to get your taxes all raised. And in the meantime, we're going to lose first responders. We're going to lose the people that care for our cities and towns. We're going to have continued problems in tribal lands. And it really worked. We started out with tribes at $20 billion request. The Republicans started out at 0 for the CARES Act. We had to come down to 8 to get the CARES Act done. $8 billion. We were asking for 20 again. They don't want to do anything. With cities and towns, we're asking for $925 billion. They don't want to do anything, and finally we've got them up to $500 billion. But that doesn't get us where we need to be. And some people will say, well, it's a lot of money. We're going deeper and deeper in debt. Well, we're borrowing it at about 0. And it is a lot of money. And we have to recognize that. But you know, what are we going to do otherwise? Stop and waste $3 trillion that we've already put into this? Are we going to look into the future and say, we have to invest in America and the American people and the American families? And that's exactly what I think we're going to do, at least to the best of our ability. And from what I've seen coming out of the candidates for president and for U.S. Senator in Arizona, they will be going in that direction also. So you've heard a lot about the tribes. The CARES Act, we were able to get that money in there for them. And Navajo was able to get $174 million. White Mountain Apache around $30 million. Gila, about $30 million. But the end result is that that's only going to last them. And then they still have their water issues to get water to homes, 15,000 homes, to get electricity there, and to get sanitation there. And so what we dropped a bill 2 weeks ago that would allow that to occur. And when the infrastructure bill came to fruition, the speaker and I talked, and she said, Tom, we're going to put your bill in the infrastructure bill. It's $2.67 billion for infrastructure on tribal nations across for sanitation purposes. We have a in that the HEROES Act. Oh no, in that bill for the infrastructure, $85 billion that would go to tribal nations and rural America, mostly, to get broadband out there and available, not just in emergencies, but for our children that are out there. For the fact that the more we can educate in this knowledge-based economy, the better off our whole nation will be. And so, we have a tremendous amount of money going to people, whether it's expanded unemployment, and it's at $600 a week again. That's going to be probably one of the roughest negotiation points we're going to have coming up in the next few weeks. We're going to have another one coming up with liabilities. The Republicans wanted to completely exempt industry from having to, or schools or anything else from having to have any liability at all. And we feel that if you set up the appropriate goals and objectives that are put forth in a protocol from OSHA, that will allow people to say, I've done this, I shouldn't be sued. And that's the direction the Democrats want to go. And again, to identify from the start before you negotiate that we're going to take some time off while another 100,000 people die, so that we can understand where we're at. If you don't understand where you're at when people are dying like that, then you got some serious problems. So I do want to have some time for questions. A little campaigning perspective. When this first started, I took 2.5 months off of campaigning at all. I took off from raising money that came in. I didn't send it back, but I didn't make calls for 2.5 months. We didn't put out emails for that time, other than for consulting on safety issues and getting people to make sure they wore masks and stuff. And now we have to be back at it full time. Well, full time as far as campaigning goes. And then the issue going forward is, there's a little bit of people talking out there, my opponent, identifying that I'm not pro-woman. Well, I'm endorsed by NARAL and Planned Parenthood. That I'm anti-gay. I'm endorsed by the Human Rights Campaign. I could go on and on. I'm anti-environment. I'm endorsed by League of Conservation Voters. I mean, we've done tremendous amount of work in the energy sector to bring in the carbon emissions issues and bring them to the forefront. And many other, methane is one of my major issues right now, because it's impacting the energy. They're not cleaning it up. They're going out of business, a lot of the fracking. I don't have a problem with that, by the way, but they are going to leave that in place. And so methane, which is much more hazardous in a short period of time, 25 years or so, impact to climate change, we can't allow that to happen. So I just want to make sure people know exactly what my record is. Go to my website and the government website. All my votes are on there. I don't do negative campaigning. My campaigning is about what I've done and what I will do and what my values are. That's what I believe. And going forward, that's what I'll continue to do. I've never personally run a negative ad against anybody, and I'm not going to start now. But I will say I'm going to defend myself on my record, and I'm proud of that record. So having said that, let's go on to questions, and we'll go from there.
Okay, someone does have a question. The first one is this. It seems like Trump is a cult leader that folks will follow regardless of where it leads. How do we reach them?
Well, I don't think at this time you're going to reach the 35% or the 30% of people. You're not going to reach those, but we need to reach minorities, and he hasn't shown any leadership on addressing those issues at all. We have to reach the suburban population. We are doing that. We have to make sure that the women's vote is with the Democratic Party. I think it's going that way, and we need to make sure that we have an inclusionary process and recognize that people have differences of opinion, and that, you know, and I think we're going down the right path. I think the Biden campaign is going down that right path. We have to show leadership, compassion. We have to show the response that we are responsible, and that we have goals and objectives that we have met and will continue to meet over history. But I think if we're going to spend money going after that 30 or 35%, it's kind of wasted money. And
Okay.
I think most people will tell you that.
All right. Thank you, Senator O'Halloran. Here's the
Thanks for the promotion, but I'm
yeah,
still a congressman.
no problem. Tom, what can we do about the constant efforts from the White House to hide data, meaning CDC via White House with data?
Well, we're going to put out a message tomorrow. I know our caucus is just upset about that. The idea, as I said, I think in the beginning, I've never seen, or maybe that was another conversation today. I started out at 7. I know Sharon does the same thing. Started out at 7, and I'm still here. And I got 3 or 4 more. But the bottom line here is that you have to understand that the CDC is the American people's agency. It has to be run as our agency. And we cannot allow some private entity all of a sudden to come in at the last moment without any discussion with Congress, without any acknowledgement that this was even thought about, and come in and say, our information on hospitals is going to go over here. You know, that doesn't help anybody, any person in America, to have your primary agency that's always been a good agency throughout pandemics, throughout designing vaccines, to be able to get American people well during these types of crises, and have a recognition around the world as a leader. And all of a sudden somebody makes a decision, well, we're going to give this information to somebody and maybe not share it with CDC. That is just, you know, that's like slapping you in the face and saying, this agency that's had a worldwide reputation doesn't know what it's doing. So we're going to give it over here to what? A private entity, and what are they going to do with it? Because I don't know. Our caucus doesn't know. I don't think the Republican caucus knows anything. And I'm sure that Congress is not going to allow it to go on.
Okay, and here's another one. Will unemployment at $600 per week be extended? And this is a 2-part question. I might as well get it in now while I can. Will USPS get funding?
Well, the HEROES Act has $25 billion in for the USPS. And we know that that's a battle that's going to be raging through the total summer. And protecting our right to vote by mail, protecting our right to vote at polls, protecting our right to have certain people restricted, or not right to have, but the right of other people to be restricted from voting, that's un-American. And we'll do everything we can. We've hired, the party has hired attorneys from all over the place, so have the Republicans. And this is going to be a legal battle that'll be fought over time. We've fought it for the last 3 years, in fact. Time and time again. I believe that Arizona's ahead of the game because we have things in place for mail-in voting. But we have to be very cautious on this. The more there's a separation in the polling, the worse it's going to get. And Congress has to take this and make sure there's a clear, definitive message that you are not going to privatize, like the new Postmaster General, that you're not going to privatize the post office, and Congress is going to stay quiet on that. It's just not going to happen. And so it'll be interesting, we have been and will continue to be supportive of the post office. The first part of the issue is unemployment. The HEROES Act has that $600 per week. Arizona happens to be one of the lowest, if not the lowest, state in the country on their amount of unemployment they pay. And somebody said to me, well, that's too much money. I can't get workers. Well, we have to have people paying their rent. We don't want them on the streets. We have to make sure that they can make their car loan, and so they can get to work when it starts again. So the idea, this is not a bridge too far. It's a bridge to keep us together. And the other side of that is okay, we'll take that money over here and put it over here into social programs because that's where it's going to have to be. And it'll be disorganized. And I think families can address their issues better than we do because I don't know the financial status of every family in America. I do know that most of our working people in America have not gotten raises on a consistent basis. And then do I say $600 is too much? And the guy in New York says, I want 800. Every American's equal here. So if it's 600 here, it's 600 there. It's the cost of living is higher there. The salaries are much lower here, and the amount you get for unemployment is much over. Now, is there going to be negotiations? I'm positive of it. Will people want to bring it down from 6 to 5 after 2 months and from 5 to 4? Probably. We'll have those discussions. But right now, we're not even having any discussion on that issue other than the fact that we voted to keep it the way it is until January 31st of 2021.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple of questions about the broadband situation in rural areas, like in rural LD 11 and 8. So, in relation to the fact that school is probably going to be online for much of the time, at least for the first part of the next year. So are we doing anything about that?
And we've got about 3 more minutes.
Okay. First of all, we have $100 billion in the HEROES Act, in the Infrastructure Bill for broadband. 85 of that is for rural and tribal areas because most urban areas have a tremendous amount of broadband capacity already. We have a subsidy in there, though, that will go to people that, you can have fiber going down the middle of Van Buren Street in Phoenix. And if you can't afford the ability to get it into your home, your child suffers, your home suffers. The amount of the knowledge-based economy that you can capture is restricted. And so we recognize that to work on it. We've worked on a number of issues over the past few years. A mapping bill of mine got in place so that we can know where broadband or where the cabling is in this country because the companies weren't keeping up. And so we have $24 million to expedite that process. I just dropped a bill the other day to allow for the country and the private industry to band together to bring in more computers, used computers, to refurbish them and to get them out to homes that are in need of them and can't afford them. That will pass too. We just put in a bill to allow for, I talked about that already, water and electricity, because if you don't have electricity, you can't have a computer up and going. And solar costs just an exorbitant amount in these rural settings. for people that right now don't have that money. And unemployment rates on some of the tribal lands is anywhere from 40 to 80% before COVID. And so there's huge problems there. And we are, in relationship to COVID, we are having more hotspots put out there. That's under the HEROES Act bill. We are going to try to get more equipment out there. It's a slower paced process to be able to do the broadband versus the hotspots. But eventually we'll, and why do we want to spend $1.5 trillion on, at this point in time, on infrastructure? Well, it's easy. We're going to have a lot of unemployment, and we need to keep people working. And if they're not working, we're paying for it, as I said before, anyway. So we need to move on and understand that these capital development issues are going to be with us for 20, 40 years. We're going to be able to put that in the field and get it done and have a resource that we're going to use again and again and again. The unemployment is going to be able to get our families through. The PPE, which has been lower in cost than the unemployment, by the way. Unemployment is much lower in cost than the PPE has been. PPP. That has made it so most of our businesses may be able to survive, but only if we continue investment. I'm not worried about the big corporations. I'm worried about downtown Casa, Grande, downtown Maricopa, any of the entities that are going to be struggling much, much more if we can't get these two bills passed. So with that, I'm going to thank you all again. I'm hoping someday to get back down there with you. The only time I went by Casa Grande on my way. I got off the plane. I'll be quick. I got off the plane when I came back from Washington. My wife Pat picked me up. She says, "Okay, we'll head home." I said, "No, we're heading to Tucson. There's a big fire down there." So I ran by, went by Tucson, went down to Tucson, came back. She said, "I thought I was going to have to drive 4 hours today. You've got me driving 8.5 hours." I said, "Yep." I said, "But now we've done our job, and we'll continue to do that for you as much as we can." And I appreciate all the people that are running for office. We need you. We need to get you elected, and we also need to make sure that we become as close to blue as blue can be in Arizona. So thank you very much, everybody.